What if I told you that the greatest strength you could ever possess is not wealth, not status, not even talent, but the ability to become mentally untouchable? Imagine a mind so sharp, so disciplined, that no one could manipulate you, no one could break you, and no one could turn your weaknesses against you. This is not fantasy. This is what I call the monster mentality. To understand this transformation, we must look at one of history's most feared and misunderstood thinkers, Niccolo Machiavelli. He observed human nature without illusions. He saw that most people live in a haze of false hopes and emotional traps, convinced that goodness, innocence, or blind trust will guarantee success. Yet time and again, history proved the opposite. Those who fail to control their minds are inevitably controlled by others. Machiavelli made it clear, the one who masters his mind masters his destiny. This is the paradox. You now understand what it means to become a monster. In the mental sense, a person who cannot be subdued, someone who looks at the world with piercing clarity and refuses to be deceived. But the real question is, how do you reach such a state of strength? How do you transform the way you think, feel, and act until you become untouchable in the face of life's manipulations? The answer lies not in superficial advice or motivational cliches, but in principles that few dare to practice. Machiavelli outlined a path built on clarity, emotional mastery, the art of appearances, and relentless action. These pillars form the foundation of what I call the monster mentality. They are not about cruelty for its own sake, nor about becoming heartless. Rather, they are about constructing a presence that cannot be broken. A mind that stands firm when the world tests you. Let us begin with the first pillar, brutal clarity. Most people are trapped in illusions. They believe friendships will last forever, that love is enough to sustain a relationship, or that good work alone guarantees recognition in their careers. But illusions are dangerous. They cloud judgment and create vulnerability. Machiavelli warned that anyone who lives in illusions will lose power, freedom, and respect. Brutal clarity demands that you see the world as it truly is, not as you wish it to be. It requires stripping away comforting lies and confronting reality in its raw form. This may hurt at first, but it is the only way to ensure that you are not misled by false promises or temporary comforts. For example, if someone in your life brings only excuses and no progress, clarity allows you to acknowledge it without denial. If a project is failing, brutal clarity helps you cut losses instead of sinking with it. This is not cynicism, nor is it pessimism. It is the recognition that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, is the only stable foundation for growth. Think of a leader who blindly trusts all allies he will be betrayed. An entrepreneur who refuses to accept that his business is collapsing will lose everything. A person who ignores warning signs in a toxic relationship will end up destroyed. Brutal clarity liberates you. When you stop lying to yourself, when you see without distortion, no one can control you. This is the first step toward becoming mentally untouchable. If brutal clarity is the foundation, the second pillar is emotional control, what Machiavelli would have called strategic mastery over the passions. Most people assume that emotions are private, invisible forces that belong only to themselves. But in truth, emotions are the most visible strings by which others manipulate us. Anger, fear, guilt, or love. Each of these can be turned into a weapon against you if you allow them to dictate your behavior. Think of how often people lose opportunities because they cannot manage their temper. A person provoked at work erupts in anger, showing their weakness to everyone present. Another allows fear to paralyze them when decisive action is required. Or someone surrenders to guilt, apologizing unnecessarily and losing credibility. In every case, the failure is the same. Emotions rule the person rather than the person ruling the emotions. Machiavelli understood that power belongs not to those who suppress their feelings, but to those who master them. Control does not mean becoming a cold machine. It means choosing when to display emotion, when to hide it, and when to transform it into strength. Imagine anger converted into focused energy that drives precision instead of chaos. Fear reinterpreted as a signal for preparation rather than paralysis. Sadness turned into deep reflection that strengthens resilience. Even joy, strategically displayed, can disarm suspicion and build alliances. This is emotional alchemy, the ability to turn every feeling into a resource. For example, in a negotiation, the weak party reveals desperation, eager to close the deal at any cost. The strong party maintains composure, projects calm confidence, and secures better terms. In a personal conflict, the ordinary individual collapses into pleading. The monster mentality responds with firmness, never displaying need, thereby retaining control. Machiavelli would say that the prince who shows vulnerability to his enemies has already lost before the battle begins. The same holds true today. Whoever cannot govern their emotions will inevitably be governed by others. But the one who possesses strategic emotional control is the master not only of himself, but also of the social dynamics around him. Once you begin to see clearly and control yourself internally, the next challenge emerges. What do you project externally? This brings us to the third pillar, the art of appearances. Machiavelli was brutally honest. What people believe about you often matters more than who you truly are. Human beings judge based on perception. They do not probe deeply. They decide quickly from what they see, hear, and sense on the surface. Therefore, the monster mentality embraces the reality that perception is power. This is not hypocrisy, but strategy. A leader may project confidence even when resources are scarce, attracting allies and investors. A professional may project boundaries and strength, even while privately wrestling with doubt, thereby earning respect. In relationships, showing composure in crisis inspires trust, even if you are internally unsettled. The art of appearances is not about living a lie. It is about consciously deciding what version of yourself the world gets to see. True authenticity is not the uncontrolled spilling of every thought and feeling. It is the deliberate act of aligning your image with your strategy. Mastering appearances creates a shield and a weapon at the same time. It protects your essence from being exposed and exploited while also allowing you to influence the perceptions of others. People believe they know you, but in reality they only see what you have chosen to reveal. This is the Machiavellian secret. By shaping perception, you shape outcomes. Consider political leaders who lacked extraordinary technical ability but commanded millions through the strength of their image. Or modern influencers who may not be the most skilled yet dominate attention because they have mastered the craft of projecting certainty and relevance. The lesson is simple. In a world where most judgments are shallow, perception consistently outweighs reality. But projection alone is insufficient. If you only think clearly, manage your emotions, and project an image without taking action, you remain merely an illusionist. This is why the fourth and final pillar is relentless execution. Action is what distinguishes the mentally untouchable from the dreamer. Machiavelli insisted that reflection without execution was powerless, while decisive action, even with mistakes, preserved strength and momentum. The weak wait for perfect conditions. They convince themselves that tomorrow will bring the right opportunity, more resources, or better timing. But tomorrow rarely comes. The monster mentality refuses paralysis. Once clarity has been achieved, emotions managed, and appearances aligned. The next step is execution, swift, precise, and unwavering. Think of Alexander the Great. He conquered half the known world not because he always had superior resources, but because he acted before his enemies could organize. Or consider modern entrepreneurs who launch projects with limited capital but expand them into empires through relentless adaptation, while countless others remain trapped in endless planning. The decisive act creates movement, and movement creates opportunity. Relentless execution is not the same as recklessness. It is not impulsivity or blind movement. It is the refusal to remain frozen when you already know the right course. A leader who hesitates loses authority. A negotiator who delays loses leverage. An individual who postpones life decisions until conditions feel perfect often ends up never moving at all. The monster mentality accepts that mistakes are inevitable, but inactivity is fatal. Every decisive action builds resilience, teaches lessons, and opens doors. Waiting too long, by contrast, guarantees loss. As Machiavelli observed, the rulers who acted with determination, even when flawed, preserved power, while the hesitant were overthrown. When you unite all four pillars, brutal clarity, emotional control, mastery of appearances, and relentless action, you achieve a transformation. You evolve into a mind that does not fracture under pressure, a spirit that does not bend to manipulation, and a presence that commands respect. This is not about cruelty for cruelty's sake. It is about resilient strategy and freedom. At this point, ask yourself, how would your life change if you no longer fell prey to illusions, if emotions no longer dictated your choices, if perception worked in your favor, and if your decisions translated into immediate action? That is the essence of becoming mentally untouchable. To fully grasp the monster mentality, we must recognize that it is not an abstract philosophy reserved for rulers of the past. It is a practical framework that applies directly to the battles we face today, in careers and relationships, in politics, and even in the digital arenas, where reputation is currency. The context has shifted, but human nature has not. People still act out of self-interest, still exploit weakness, and still reward perception over substance. Those who fail to adapt remain vulnerable. Brutal clarity reminds you that life is not fair and illusions are costly. Emotional mastery equips you to remain calm and deliberate in the face of provocation. The art of appearances ensures that others perceive strength even when you are under strain. And relentless execution guarantees that you will not remain stuck while others hesitate. Together, these pillars form an unbreakable mindset. But let us take this further. Why does this transformation matter? Because most individuals today are exhausted by manipulation. They feel used in workplaces that promise loyalty but deliver exploitation. They experience betrayal in personal relationships because they mistake kindness for protection. They suffer in silence as others seize opportunities while they remain paralyzed by doubt. Without a stronger mental framework, they repeat the same cycles of weakness. The monster mentality offers liberation from this cycle. When you see reality clearly, you stop wasting energy on illusions. When you govern your emotions, you stop being a puppet pulled by invisible strings. When you master appearances, you turn perception into an advantage instead of a liability. And when you execute relentlessly, you stop living in the shadow of hesitation. This process also carries a deeper psychological impact. You begin to realize that authenticity does not mean exposing every thought or insecurity. It means living in alignment with strategy and principle, rather than surrendering to impulse. You begin to experience what can only be described as mental sovereignty. You no longer wait for external validation because you are anchored in clarity, discipline, and purposeful action. Imagine entering a negotiation where others expect to provoke your impatience. Instead, you remain composed, letting them exhaust themselves while you decide the exact moment to strike. Imagine stepping into a crisis that sends others into panic. Instead, you project calm authority, turning the storm into an opportunity for leadership. Imagine looking at a failing project and cutting it off before it drains more resources, redirecting energy into a more promising venture. These are not theoretical examples. They are everyday applications of a monster mentality, and the transformation is cumulative. With each act of clarity, you reinforce perception. With each moment of emotional mastery, you enhance control. With each projection of strength, you shape how others respond. And with each decisive execution, you create a reputation for action that compounds over time. The result is not only power, but freedom, the ability to live without being enslaved by illusions, emotions, or external control. The final stage of this journey is understanding that the monster mentality is not about cruelty, nor about rejecting compassion altogether. It is about strength without illusion, discipline without self-betrayal, and power without dependency. To be mentally untouchable is to be free in a world that constantly tries to enslave you through distraction, fear, and manipulation. Machiavelli would argue that the truly powerful are not those who seek to dominate others blindly, but those who first conquer themselves. Once you achieve brutal clarity, you stop being deceived. Once you master emotions, you cannot be played like an instrument. Once you control appearances, you decide how the world perceives you. And once you act with relentless execution, you dictate outcomes rather than waiting for them. This transformation is not for everyone. It requires honesty so raw that most people cannot bear it. It demands discipline in moments when surrender would be easier. It calls for the courage to project strength, even while privately struggling. But those who embrace it discover a kind of resilience that changes everything. They cease to be ordinary participants in life's games and become players who set the rules. So ask yourself, are you tired of living on the defensive, always one step behind? Are you ready to stop being controlled by illusions, emotions, and the expectations of others? If the answer is yes, then the time has come to begin your own transformation. See reality as it is. Command your emotions. Shape perception. Execute with precision. Build the indestructible mind. Because in the end, the world does not belong to those who wait, or those who hope, or those who simply wish. It belongs to those who act with clarity, strategy, and conviction. That is the essence of the monster mentality, and it is within your reach starting now.